episode number 139 with Doug Lyford. Welcome to the Heads Up Poker Podcast. This is Steve Barton, and thank you for tuning in. I am here with returning guest Doug Lyford. Doug, I believe the last time we had you on was episode 15, and that was an interesting time. That was Doug and I met probably about 3.5 years ago on TPE. We started up a little study group. It was you, me, Jacob. And it's kind of blossomed into you, me, Mike Snyderman, and Carlos Welch, and we just throw hands to each other. And Mac is in there as well. And we just have this little study group that seems to someone posts a hand, every couple of days, and then we all dissect it, and it's a lot of fun. But thank you for coming back on, Doug.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, Steve. It's been a long time. What episode is this? How many are you up to now?
139.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Goes by quick, huh?
It seems like just yesterday that you were just talking about starting up with the podcast.
I know. This has really been quite a run. I never really, when I started it, I never really ever imagined not doing an episode, every week or anything, but it's just kind of blossomed into this, and it's been a hell of a run. This has been a lot of fun. Now we're sponsored, and I have an editor, and the podcast isn't making much money, but it's actually producing something, and this has been a lot of fun. I've gone back and listened to some of the past episodes, and I'm like, oh my God, we sounded terrible. I can't believe that. How could I fold that hand? It's been fun. So the last time, to catch you guys up, if you didn't hear Doug on episode 15, at that time you were an electrical engineer, and you were making $70K a year, and you quit your job to become a poker pro. And you did that. You were backed by I think Mark and Ben, and you played poker full time for about a year, right?
Yeah, about 14 months or so. Yeah.
14 months. Okay, yeah. And I was talking with my parents about this last night, and I was telling them, that you were an engineer, and you quit your job for, I guess, over a year to be a poker pro, and they were so impressed because they're like, "Wow, that takes some balls." I can't believe it. Because so many people talk about doing that, and it never formulates into action. And but you actually did it. Well done, man. That's impressive.
Yeah, thanks. For me at the time, this was a while ago now, but at the time when I decided to quit my job, I was at a point where I was doing, I had a schedule that was just not sustainable at all. I wasn't getting enough sleep. I was working, 50, 60 hours a week, sometimes more, and I would come home and grind most nights.
Yeah.
So it was not uncommon for me to work like a 12-hour shift, come home, grind, go to bed at 4 a.m., sleep for 4 hours, and then fly to some other place for a project. So I had to make a decision. I had to either cut back on poker or quit my job, and I decided to go with the latter.
Yeah. Right on. What are some things you learned during that year? Hindsight's always 20/20. And so if you had to do it over, would you do anything differently? Would you have done it exactly the same? What did you learn? What were some of the things you picked up on?
I think I learned a lot with that experience. If I could go back, I would definitely do it again. I would definitely, I'm glad I did it. It didn't ultimately work out. I wasn't making enough money, and I eventually ended up going back and getting a job in the engineering world. But it was awesome to have that a little over a year of time where I was kind of independent. I got to do a lot of traveling, met some really cool people, met you guys and the crew that we have in the Skype group for studying. I went to the UK for like 18 days, lived on a houseboat in a canal in London for 4 days, and just did a lot of really cool things that I wouldn't have ever experienced if I would have just stuck with my job.
Yeah.
I basically went broke in the process, but I think it was worth it. I think that the experience was worth more than me just staying at a job and just doing something just for the sake of money.
Yeah.
And, everything worked out. I was able to get another job very quickly when I decided it was time to go back. And, I've been playing ever since, a little bit less volume, but I'm really happy with the whole experience and what I learned from it. A couple of mistakes that I think I made. One was just I think I quit a little bit too soon. I would have liked to have had a little bit more of a buffer in my savings. But I was pretty eager to do it, and I also.
You mean you quit poker a little too soon, or you quit your job a little bit too soon?
Oh, sorry, I quit my job too soon.
Okay.
I think that maybe if I would have stayed 3 to 6 months more, I would have been set up a little bit better. But I just got to a point where I was pretty fed up with it and just pulled the trigger.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I think that I don't think getting a backing arrangement was the right decision for me. I think if I could go back, I would have just played on my own.
Okay.
And the guys that I worked with that backed me were great guys, and they taught me a lot about tournament poker. And I don't have any hard feelings with them at all. I still talk to them to this day, and I think they're great guys. But I just think for me personally, it caused me a lot of stress, and I kind of wanted to have the freedom to be able to play whatever games I wanted. And fire off in cash games occasionally if I felt like it, things like that. And I also kind of started playing bigger when I quit my job than I was used to.
Okay.
For a little while, and that kind of started me off a little bit on the wrong foot, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting into makeup and stuff, that's not fun. But that for me personally, I don't think that was the right decision. I do think that there are stables out there that provide really good value, and there are a lot of people who have joined those stables and crushed now and are doing really well at high stakes. So I think that it is a valid path to success. But I just think for me personally, it wasn't the best decision.
Yeah, those guys offered me backing in 109s and 215s, and at the time I was playing $30, $50 tournaments, and the thought of getting into makeup just fucking terrified me. I couldn't do it. You know what I mean? And even getting backed for maybe some WSOP events and stuff, I thought about doing it, but I just can't. I've just always played on my own dime. There has been a couple of tournaments where people have bought half of me or whatever for like this one event, but it I don't know. There's just some. I just kind of want to make it on my own dime. I don't know that I could do that. It doesn't really seem to fit with me.
Yeah, I think that's smart, and I think it depends on the person too, right? Like some people I think can deal with that a little bit better than others, and for me personally, I never really liked selling action that much for live events. I've done it a couple of times for small packages, but I always feel like I feel better at the table if I know I have 100% of myself and I don't have to worry about tweeting updates on breaks and things like that. I don't have to worry about I think this is the right play, but if this doesn't work out, I'm going to look really stupid when I tweet this on the next break. I think it's hard to not think about those kind of things if you're selling significant action. Again, it depends on the person. I know that in the high stakes world, there's these guys playing these super high rollers. They're selling a lot of their action because they're playing 100K buy-ins, and they probably don't have that mindset, and it probably doesn't really affect their decision making too much. But again, for me, and I think for a lot of people, it's true that it's really hard to not have those thoughts at least cross your mind if you're selling action.
Yeah, I remember one in particular. I only had 50% of myself, and I remember 5-bet shoving all in with pocket tens, and I'm like, how am I going to justify this to? How can I describe the last 2 hours of table dynamics in a tweet?
I mean? You only have what was it, 140 characters or whatever?
Yeah, exactly.
How are you going to explain all of the factors that weighed into your decision in that spot?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, what did you think he had when he flipped over pocket kings? You know what I mean? It just wasn't for me. But on the flip side of the coin, as much as I don't want to sell pieces of myself, I really do enjoy buying pieces of other people. There's something about that I just love about the Twitter sweat. When I'm stuck at work for 3 days in a row and I know that I have a 4% of a horse, it kind of makes the day go by pretty quick. You know what I mean? It's pretty cool.
Yeah, same here. Cool. I feel the same way. I really enjoy buying action and sweating it. Being on the other end is a lot of fun, I think.
Yeah. Speaking of which, Mac in our study group, do you know, I know he's selling 35% of himself for the upcoming WSOP circuit in Chicago. Do you know, has he sold all of that?
I'm not sure if he has any left or not. I haven't really checked into that.
Okay. I got 3% of them for that. That's going to be October 12th through 21st. So if anyone's listening and he might have a few percent left, go ahead and hit me up, headsuppokerpodcast@gmail.com, and I can shoot you through to him and see if he's got any left. But I'm excited about that one. That's going to be a neat sweat. That's going to be a busy week for me. I'm not going to be able to play any poker, but at least I'll still be able to be plugged into the poker world, and hopefully Matt can cut out a deep run, and we'll see how we do.
Yeah, it'd be fun to sweat for sure.
Did you get any pieces of them or?
No, I didn't. I'm actually going to be playing. I'm going to Foxwoods for the World Poker Finals next month. So all my funds are going to that.
Nice. Right on. How long are you going to be up there for?
I think I'm going for a whole week, like maybe 6 days. We're going on a Sunday and then we're leaving Friday. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, when you got back out of full-time poker and then you went back into entered the 9 to 5, did you go back into electrical engineering or?
Yeah. So what happened was near the end of my full-time poker stint, I was fairly deep in makeup for. It's all relative, but I thought it was a significant amount of makeup, and so I was trying to figure out what I was going to do if I was going to go back into engineering, if I was going to try to go back to my old job, which wasn't something I wanted to do, but I knew it was an option if it got to that point. So I started to, in the last couple of months that I was playing, I started to teach myself web development, and I started freelancing a little bit, doing some front-end web development projects. I wasn't making much money because it's hard to charge a lot of money when you're just self-taught and you're just learning. But I got some good experience and I really enjoyed it. And doing programming is something I've always enjoyed. And at my first job, I did some of that, but it was like maybe 30% of my job. But it was always my favorite part. So I started to learn that, but I wasn't making enough money quickly enough to do that full time. And I eventually, actually, it kind of worked out perfectly, the timing. An old friend of mine just happened to call me out of the blue and asked if I was looking for an engineering job. And so I ended up taking a job with another company doing power station commissioning and testing. So testing transformers and electrical equipment that is responsible for controlling power distribution.
Okay.
So that was like a whole new industry for me. I had to learn a lot of stuff to be able to do that. But I kind of, before I started that job, I kind of got that seed planted that I really like coding. I want to code. So I set myself a goal to, within 1 year, this sounds bad probably, but as I was starting this new job, I set myself a goal that within 1 year, I wanted to leave that job to go to software engineering school, to a coding boot camp to become a software engineer.
Okay.
And then almost exactly a year later, it was like 11 months and 3 weeks or something, I left that job to go to Hack Reactor, which is a coding boot camp.
So that goal worked.
Yeah, so it worked out.
You even beat it by a week.
Yeah, I just slid in there.
What? Okay, now that part interests me more than anything else. What did you do when you decided that you set that goal? Did you physically write it down? Was it something that you looked at every morning? Like what?
Basically, I did a budget. I just took a spreadsheet, took my new salary for my new job, took all my bills, and figured out what I was going to be able to save every month.
Okay.
And looked into the costs for these schools and figured out. I knew I was going to probably have to finance a significant amount of the tuition, but I wanted to be able to have enough to live on for like 5 or 6 months, so that I could go to school and do the whole job search thing. So I was fortunate enough to be able to have some pretty good success in tournaments over that time. which allowed me to pretty quickly pay off my makeup once I started that new job, and then make enough to pay off some other debt and save enough up to go ahead and do that. It was actually a fairly aggressive goal in the sense that I kind of needed to have decent success in tournaments to be able to reach that year goal. And I was fortunate enough that it happened. So yeah, I was looking at their enrollment dates and all that stuff. And I knew that they start a program like every 3 months or so. So I knew there was one in May, which would line up perfectly with my year goal. So that was my target. And I actually took like a little bit of time off from work near the end before I gave my notice. I took a week and just like studied JavaScript, like 50 hours in a week. And so I could get ready to apply for the school. And I just applied to Hack Reactor. That was the only one I wanted to go to. It seemed like the best one, and they have clearly, in my opinion, the best remote online program out there, which is what I wanted, because relocating to California is a lot more expensive, and I would have had to save up and wait longer if I was going to relocate, go to a physical campus. So having a high quality remote program was something that was really important for me, and they seemed like the only school that was offering a really good solution for that. So I just studied for a while, and I went and did the technical interview and got in.
Yeah. One of the things that's always impressed me about you, Doug, is that, how old are you?
I'm 29.
29, yeah. I remember when we first started our study group with you, me, and Jacob, and I think you might have been the first guy that I heard Bitcoin from, because you told me that you were mining these things. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is or what it means. But that was one of the things that keep me in, that you're just an entrepreneur. And I think it just kind of speaks to today's society when it comes to careers. You know, I mean, like our parents and grandparents, they, kind of got a job as with Lockheed Martin, and they started there and they worked for 40 years, and then they got a pension. And I think in today's society, it's more so that people are going to have multiple careers and maybe even have 3 or 4 different jobs at the same time, and multiple sources of income. And you can't even anticipate, or really, I don't even know how you can plan for what your job's going to be 10 years from now, because the technology doesn't even exist yet. It's things are changing and happening so fast. I don't know how you could anticipate that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's really amazing how fast technology moves these days. I mean, even when I was in school at Hack Reactor, they're a leading edge program, but some of the technology we used was still like beginning to become, I don't want to say obsolete, but it was like new versions of the frameworks we were using and things like that. The newer versions were already being pushed out. And then, in every job I've had in technical fields, that's always like one of the biggest problems, is keeping up with the pace of technology and providing the best solutions with what's available. It's always a very big challenge.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. You've kind of transitioned from tournaments into cash, right?
Yeah. So lately, let me go back a little bit to Hack Reactor. I finished that like 6 weeks ago or something. I graduated.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. It was a big weight off. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the program, but it was also super intense. It was about 13 hours a day, 6 days a week.
That doesn't leave much time for poker.
No, it doesn't. And I squeezed in a little bit of poker during that, but not much, and probably more than I should have. But anyway, so yeah, that finished 6 weeks ago-ish, and then I started a new job as a software engineer 3 weeks ago. Okay. So since I finished Hack Reactor and started job searching and then started this new job, I've been kind of transitioning into playing mostly cash, and I think my goal is to be basically 100% cash, and then maybe play like some high value tournaments occasionally. Maybe like the Bovada Sunday Major and things like that are really high value, and I expect to have a decent EV in.
Ones that you get a lot, 15% of the field is satellited in, stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, like the 30s, like the $30 15Ks and stuff, those are like pretty good value in my opinion too. But I don't think I can justify, if I am able to develop a good win rate at 1-2 in cash games, the hourly at a cash table is just going to be higher than my dollar EV for playing a $30 tournament.
Yeah.
But if you're playing a 162 and you still have a decent edge, that becomes, I think, relevant and worth thinking about adding in.
Yeah. 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 Now, what kind of cash games are you playing? What sites are you playing on?
So I've just been playing on Ignition, Bovada, the zone games. So they're the fast fold games. Mostly playing 50-cent dollar and 1-2.
Okay.
And I've been really enjoying that. It's super fun, and it's also like it's great to be able to, with my schedule, I love being able to play like a 45-minute session and get a bunch of hands in. So when 50-cent dollar is running, it's not always, but peak times like weekend nights and things, usually there's a pretty good pool in there. So when there is, I four table. I play 2 tables of each limit, and that's requires a lot of focus, and I can't play very long sessions and maintain a good edge, I don't think. So I usually limit, when I'm four tabling, I limit my sessions to about 45 minutes. And that doesn't mean I only play 45 minutes in a day, but I'll play, 3 or 4 sessions with little breaks in between.
And how many hands can you get in a 45-minute session for tabling on? Anyone that doesn't know what this is, it's basically like a Zoom, or it's where you get cards, and then let's say you get 7-2 offsuit and you're on the button. You can fold, and then now instantly it puts you into another table. Whereas the people that are still sitting at that table, they don't know that you've folded yet. Your cards are still sitting there, but you've already left that table, gone on to another one, and you've started a new hand. So it's a way to really, really get some volume in and see a lot of hands.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So how many hands can you see in 45 minutes for tabling like that?
So I don't have like solid data on that. It's something I've been wanting to look into. I use this web-based software called Pokit to review hands, and the way that works is you have to manually go into the settings in Bovada and request your hand histories to download them. And,
I didn't even think about that. It's not like you can use HM2 or Poker Tracker because you're playing on Ignition, huh?
Yeah, and so normal HUDs, I believe, work. Or at least the last time I've played regular tables, you can get HUDs to work on the normal cash game tables, but with the fast fold, there's no HUDs available. So the way to review your hands is to download them manually through the settings in Bovada, and then there's a couple of different ways to convert. There's a converter you can use that you can then pull them into something like Poker Tracker if you want to do it that way. But I've just been using this Pokit website. It's pretty good. I like it. There's a few quirks, but it's pretty convenient because when you download it, when you download the hands, it automatically uploads them to the site for you. So you don't have to, there's no extra step of converting them or anything.
Okay. Yeah. I used to have to use that Bovada hand history converter, but that you don't need that. Okay.
So you just have to remember to go in there and do that like every 3 or 4 days, because the hands, you can only get the hands back to 7 days.
Okay.
But if you do it once every 7 days, you have to time it perfectly at the same exact moment, or else you're going to be missing a few hands depending on when you play sessions.
Okay.
So you just have to go in and do that every like 3 or 4 days. And in the past, I've missed it sometimes. So I'm missing some hands from that sample. But once I have some sessions, a decent sample over a significant number of sessions for tabling, I can go in there and figure out my average hands per hour. I've tried to do the mental math and kind of come up with a guess, though I don't know how accurate it is. So if we're going to I think the best way to approach it is to try to guess how many hands you're getting per hour at one table first.
Yeah. Multiply that by 4.
So, a normal speed table online, what is it, around maybe like 50 hands an hour, 40 hands an hour, something like that?
Yeah, 45, 50, that sounds accurate.
Yeah, and I think generally, at least back in the day when Full Tilt was around for U.S. players and they had the fast tables, I think people were saying like around 4 times as many hands per hour.
Wow.
So that's if you go on the high end of that, that's 200 hands per hour per table. So around 800 if you're four tabling.
Okay.
That might be a bit off. Like I said, it could be 600 to 800, somewhere around there.
Yeah, that's nuts. That's an intense amount of focus for 45 minutes or an hour. I've played those a few times, and the most I could do was 2 tables. I can't imagine doubling that. That's some serious focus there. Well, speaking of focus, I'm going to segue into Elliot Roe. Copy the best players in the world. Why not get in the right mindset before you play? Listen to a meditation tape just before you play for the type of game that you're about to play. Get in the right mindset so you can focus on poker. Listen to an MP3 before you play. Put it on your phone, your computer, your tablet. He's got MP3s for everything. Live cache, online MTTs. He's got a post-game cooldown, the Mindset Booster package, which comes with 5 MP3s. Confidence, motivation, recovery, volume, study booster. The Simple Volume System. Just try it for free. There's no obligation. Listen to his 7-minute tilt buster. Put it right on your phone and listen to it. It's free. From me and Elliot to you. This is the next step in poker, The Mindset Advantage by Elliot Roe. Use the code HUPOKER. Score yourself a discount. You'll find the link in the show notes. HUPOKER. Cool. Well, you mentioned you have a cash hand. I'm assuming this is from Fast Fold from Zoom Poker.
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to ask you a question. You're plugging Elliot there. I was going to ask you, have you used the Prime Mind app that he and Fedor came out with a little while back?
No. What is this?
Oh man, I love it. I use it every day. It's an app that has a bunch of primers, they call them. They're just recordings of mental game primers from Elliot. So they're just like, I guess, hypnosis sessions that you can use for a bunch of different scenarios. And there's categories. So they have it for poker. They have it for esports, fitness, and then they have some general ones for just like going, listen to this before you go to work or listen to this before you go to bed, that kind of thing.
I can't believe I don't know about this. Okay, what's the name of the app?
It's called Primed Mind.
Primed Mind. Okay. Yeah. I'm excited now. I'm going to download this app as soon as the podcast is over. Awesome.
You're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. It's like, I think it's like $15 a month. I'm sure you can get a free trial.
Okay.
But I think it's worth it if you use it regularly. I think it's definitely worth the subscription.
Right on. Good deal. I've got Ryan Carter is a guy that I work with for all the Elliot stuff, and I'm gonna download this right after that and contact him. I'm excited. Cool. So you use Elliot quite a bit too. I knew that.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I've been trying to focus a lot lately on just mindset and mental game stuff. And I feel like I get way more value out of my time by focusing on that stuff than I do out of like studying the technical side of the game.
Yeah. I every now and then, the other day, remember when you helped me out with my HUD? It wasn't showing all the hands that I had on players that I knew I had thousands of hands on. Well, just before that, I listened to an Elliot Roe MP3 on Study Booster, and then right after that, you and I logged on, and I don't know where I figured it would take us an hour to figure out why the stats weren't coming up, and you figured it out in about 2.5 minutes, and I was like, okay, well, thank you, Doug. You're all right. Well, I'm going to go grind poker now. I was like, okay. And so after that, I started to break down some of the players that, some of the regulars and ones that I had thousands of hands on, and start analyzing their game and how I can, how I can beat them. And before I knew it, I had analyzed about a dozen players, and I had spent 2 hours in front of my Hold'em Manager 2 studying this. And when I finally quit, I realized that the reason that I had spent 2 hours studying these guys was because I spent 8 minutes listening to his study booster, only 15 minutes before. And that was what subconsciously, started that. I really believe, had I not listened to that before you and I got on, that it never even would have clicked. You know what I mean? Like those little meditation tapes, they just plant these little ideas in your subconscious that you act on without even realizing it, and you can really see the value in it when something like that happens, or when you've been playing MTTs for 10 hours and you're still just laser focused. You know, I can feel the difference. It's I love them. I'll be doing those for as long as I play cards, which will probably be until the day I die. So I love his tapes, and I love the fact that they're focused on exactly what kind of game you're going to play. You know, it's very cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Right on. Well, you got a strategy hand?
I think so. Yeah, give me 1 second here. Okay, so this hand, it's not. I don't know if it's super interesting. I kind of scrambled to try to find a hand here before we go on the call, but this is a 6-max 1-2 zone hand from Ignition. We are in cutoff, and we have 6-7 of spades. We have about 120 big blinds. And the relevant stats for this hand are going to be small blind has about 70 bigs, and big blind has us covered. He has like 150 or so.
Okay, and what's the max buy-in here? 100 BBs?
Yeah, 100 BB max. Yeah.
Okay, so we're in the cutoff with 120 big blinds. The small blind has 60 big blinds, you said?
70 big blinds. Yep.
70 big blinds, and the big blind has us covered with 150. Okay, and we've got 6-7 of spades.
Yep. So 6-7 of spades. It folds to us in cutoff. We open the 6-7, and my standard open sizing in these games is 2.5x, and that's the sizing I always use, except for blind versus blind. But there's a little bug in the software on Ignition where sometimes I'll type a 5 in and click bet, and I won't notice this, but it won't register it, and it'll make me bet the minimum. So sometimes it makes me min raise, which is what happened here.
Okay.
So I min raised to $4, which I don't think is that relevant. I don't think it really changes the hand too much. But I just wanted to mention that.
Well, they might be calling slightly wider than if you'd made it 5.
Yeah, I think we have to give like the blinds a little bit of a wider defense range for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so I make it 4. Button folds, small blind calls, and big blind 3 bets to 16. So it's back to us with 4 already in, and we have 6-7 of spades. We're playing slightly deeper. We're 120 bigs effective with the 3-better.
Okay. And one important note on these fast fold games is that, and especially on Bovada Ignition, is you have no idea who these players are.
Right.
You have no history on them. You have no HUD to tell you what they're. So you kind of have to go by a general sampling of what the pool of players does, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you kind of have to play. It's a very exploitative strategy, I would say. I play very exploitatively, but I do it based on what the average tendencies of the pools are, and then I do make adjustments based on stack sizes and timing of my opponents. But those adjustments are pretty subtle. Like I'll change my pre-flop ranges depending on stack sizes of my opponents, because someone with 200 plus big blinds is more likely to be a reg or have some idea what they're doing. Whereas if someone has 60 bigs, I'm gonna not give them quite as much credit as being as competent. So I'm gonna be willing to take a few more marginal spots, go to flops with slightly more marginal hands against those players.
Okay, now does this software have the option of like auto reloading to buy in for the max 100 BBs?
No, and that's a good question, because you have to manually click the rebuy button. So if you lose a pot and you lose 40 bigs, sometimes you can't reload before the next hand.
Okay.
So the read of people having a shorter stack isn't 100% solid read. They could still be a reg. They just didn't get a chance to reload yet. So you have to kind of take that with a grain of salt.
Okay. That was my question, because the small blind's only got 70. So if that is an option, then we can say that, well, he's probably more likely a recreational player because he doesn't have that auto reload, but he could have just lost 30 big blinds the hand before, and he is a reg. And okay. All right. Good to know.
Yeah. But one thing you can do is, and what I usually try to do is like if I'm about to call a big river bet or something, and I think it's like I could lose the hand or I could win. I just click the rebuy button before I click call, so that way, if I lose the pot, theoretically it should reload me back up to the full amount before the next hand. So if somebody is shorter, there's a reasonable chance that they're definitely less likely to be a reg. But even if they are a reg, they're probably not fully focused, because if they were, they could just make sure that they were going to reload before the next hand.
Okay.
So it could be a reg that's just not focused enough to, or just not aware enough to, set up that reload just in case they lose the pot.
Okay.
So it is a read worth considering, and I do let that influence my ranges a little bit.
Okay, interesting. All right. Okay, so we've got 6-7 of spades. We accidentally raise to $4. The small blind calls 4, and then the big blind 3 bets to 16. And what kind of range are you putting here for the average player pool with 150 big blinds?
So the big blind squeeze range here, I think it's going to be fairly strong because I don't think that the big blind is going to be like too weighted towards bluffs. I think it's going to be value heavy because he's getting ridiculous pot odds. So he doesn't really have much incentive to be having too much of a bluffing range with his 3-bet because he can just flat a lot of hands getting the pot odds that he's getting. So I think that he has a strong range of something like 8s plus, ace queen plus, maybe ace jack off sometimes, and then like some suited aces, like maybe ace 10 suited plus the occasional like ace 5 suited. I would weight that maybe like 30% of the time or something.
Okay.
So that's what his value range looks like, and I don't think in general players are going to have that much of a bluffing range here. I mean, some people could just like decide to 3-bet bluff an ace X hand or something, but in general, I'm going to give him a range of value that looks like that.
He's probably not doing that with things like 8-9 suited.
I don't think so. I mean, I wouldn't completely rule it out. I would give it like a small weight, I guess, with those type of hands, but I just think that there's a decent amount of incentive to just flat those hands because they play really well multi-way.
Exactly. He's only got to call $2 and see a flop with hands like that. Okay. You're taking out small pocket pairs, 2s through 7s, because those are just really easy set minds that he can just click call and see if he's good or not.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
That sounds right. Okay. Well, I'm assuming you didn't fold because that wouldn't.
I did not fold.
Okay.
So because Phil's range, like I just said, is probably fairly, somewhat strong. And I don't really think there's any reason for me to ever bluff here. Plus I have to call 12, and if small blind calls as well, the pot's going to be 48. So 12 into 48 is I need like around, because of the rake, I probably need like 30% equity to break even.
Yeah.
Which I think I definitely have with 6-7 suited. And the other thing is when someone's like shorter stack and they just flat small blind, I think that the vast majority of the time they're going to reflat once I call this 3-bet. Because they're getting the same pot odds that we are. And once they already flatted once, they've really capped their range. So I think like the vast majority of the time when I call here, we're going 3-way to the flop, and we're going 3-way to the flop with a $48 pot, and I'm in position with a hand that plays well multi-way.
Yeah.
So I think it's a pretty good spot to just flat, go post flop. So I did call, and then small blind called.
Okay. So we go to the flop. We got 48 in the pot. What is it after the rake? Would it be like 44, or what's the rake here?
So this app that I'm using doesn't show the rake properly, but it's like 5% rake. So
okay.
It'd just be like a small amount taken off the top,
Okay.
few dollars, but
240.
Yeah. So we can just call it 48. It'll be close enough.
Okay.
So the pot's 48, and we're 3-way to the flop, and the flop is ace of spades, 3 of spades, king of hearts.
King of hearts. Well, that's a pretty good flop. Okay. And what's the small blind do?
So small blind checks, and then big blind bets half pot, 24 into 48.
Okay.
So we have to call, if we decide to call here with 6-7 suited, we have a flush draw and like a tiny sliver of equity from our backdoor runner straight draw, I guess, which I do think about those types of things in game, but it's such a small factor that it's not really too relevant. If I get into really close situations, if I do have that slightly extra equity, it might lean me one way or the other. But so in this spot, basically, we just have a flush draw.
Okay. Because we're going to need to catch a running 4-5 to get our straight.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So if we call, the pot is going to be 96, and we have to call it 24. So again, we need 25% equity. I think it's like definitely a fine spot to call just because of implied odds. Because I think villain's range here is quite heavy with ace X. I think he has like ace queen, ace king, maybe ace jack, ace 10 stuff. He could have a hand like king queen with the king, like king queen of spades or something. But I think that he's not really going to be leading here with like jacks or something like that when it's three-way, the way the hand's played out pre-flop. So I think like super often he just has a decent ace here. So I think that floating. So yeah, I think floating here is pretty good because we have good implieds if we do get there. So I did just call, and the other thing is I expect small blind to just be like dumb with the hand fairly often here. And if he's not dumb with the hand, he might just make a bad play like check calling with a weaker ace or something, which is good for us. That's fine. We're just still drawing to the same outs, so I'm not too concerned about what small blind's going to do here.
Yeah. And if he rips it in, then you get to see what the big blind does after that, and you can make your decision there.
Yeah. So I call. Small blind folds. Turn is the 9 of spades, so we get there on the turn. Pot is $96 at this point, and the effective stacks are 204. So I have 204, and he has villain has me covered. So we have a little over 2x pot in our stack. Villain is first to act, and he leads for $48 into 96. So again, just another half pot bet.
So he's just clicking the half pot.
Yep. So I guess there's a couple of different options we could go with here. I guess we could raise, or we could just call. I don't really think that raising is good here. If villain has ace king, he's probably just going to go with it if we raise, but he's also probably just going to be jamming a lot of rivers anyway. And it's not impossible that villain has a better flush than us here, although it's pretty unlikely. But against his likely range, I don't want to let him find a hero fold on the turn, which I think he could do with like an ace queen or an ace jack or something sometimes if he just has top pair. So my thought here is that I'm planning to just call turn and jam river. If he bets again on the river and it's not an all-in bet, I'll just jam over it. If he checks on the river, I'll just shove because we're going to have roughly a pot-sized bet left if we call here. So I think just calling here, getting it in on the river is the best play.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm adding it up right now, and if we call here, the pot's going to be 192, and we got actually we have less than that behind after our call. So yeah, I like that. I think if you jam here, you're right. He could find a hero fold with any of the wheel aces. Probably not folding ace king, but I can't imagine that villain would fold that. But yeah, the ace queen, the ace jack, you allow him to get away from it. Whereas if you get a nice blank on the river, you could double up.
Yeah, and the other thing is like if we do call here, the worst card on the river I think is another spade. Basically, any spade on the river is kind of sucks for us. Although it's not so bad because the ace of spades is on the board, so it's not as likely that villain has a spade in his hand, but it's still likely enough that if we call here and the river comes a spade and villain checks, I think I'm just checking back and going to showdown.
Yeah.
I don't think it really makes any sense to try to get any value on a fourth spade.
No, I think you're just turning your flush into a bluff at that point.
And the other thing is, like, if we do call here and then the river comes out of spade and villain just shoves, I think we have to fold.
Yeah.
Because I really don't think the pool is going to be like turning two pair into a bluff on a four spade run out or something like that, like almost ever.
Yeah.
So I think just calling here, folding on a spade river versus aggression, and otherwise just getting it in on the river is the plan.
Yeah, I think you're right. I agree. Okay. All right, so we got, let's see, 192 in the pot. And what's the river?
So we got 192 in the pot. The river is a 7 of diamonds, and this is really not very interesting because we kind of know what our play is here. Villain bets 100 or 96 into 192, and we just shove. I think it's like pretty obvious that there's no other play at this point.
Yeah.
And villain calls us pretty quickly, and he has ace king with the king of spades.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Well, that was the perfect river.
Yeah. I mean, any like non-ace, non-king, non-spade rivers is just like fine in that spot. So there's very few rivers that we don't want to see, which is another reason why I don't think we should ever be raising the turn.
Yeah, I agree. I've got one tournament hand. If you still got a little bit.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Okay. First, I'm going to tell you about Tournament Poker Edge. Join myself and Doug on TPE. There's a bunch of new videos up. Casey Jarzabek has a deep runs on late regging and some short stack play. Andrew Brokus is reviewing his live tournament sweats from the WSOP. And there's a new series up right now that I'm super stoked on, and it's Colin, and he's going over some like the hyper turbos and the turbo plays that are so popular now. So I love his videos. They're very, very. He just has this way of explaining it that is real easy to understand, and he's a very, very good instructor. So if you play tournaments and are at all serious about your game, you have to join TPE. Check out the free videos first. There's dozens of them. You can post in the forums. You can watch the training videos. Or if you like a more structured approach, then go to the TPE University. When you join, use the code HUP month, HUP quarter, or HUP year. Get the discount, save yourself some cash, and start learning today. Tournament Poker Edge. Okay, this one is from a tournament, and last week I had on Alex Fitzgerald, and I was picking his brain about donk betting, and so this is kind of in line with that because I do a donk bet here, but we're in the big blind. It's first or second level here, and the blinds are 20-40. We're, let's see, 7-handed, and we're in the big blind. And under the gun raises to 80. So blinds are 20-40. He min raises to 80. And we've got Jack-10 of hearts in the big blind.
Okay.
So for an under the gun raiser, we've got 100 hands on him, 108 hands. And he's a 28-19, 7.7 3-bet. Are you ever 3-betting here, or are you just always calling, or?
How deep are you?
250 big blinds.
250, okay. I think I would normally just flat here. I don't think I would 3-bet too often because, under the gun range is going to be pretty snug, especially this early in the tournament, pre-ante. And plus, Jack-10 suited is a good hand, plays well deep. So I think I would just flat here.
Yeah, I figured the same thing. Maybe if he's in the cutoff or button, we might 3-bet. Maybe if the small blind raised us, we might 3-bet for value if the small blind raises pretty wide. But yeah, I like a flat here. Okay, so we flat with Jack-10 of hearts. Total pot is 180. We've got almost 10K behind, 250 big blinds effective. And we go to the flop, and the flop is interesting. It's with Jack-10 of hearts, the flop is 7 of clubs, 9 of spades, king of clubs.
Okay.
So we've got a double gut shot. An 8 will give us a straight, and a queen will give us a straight. We have no backdoor flush draw, but we've got a double gutter here. What's your line here? Into a pot of 180? Are you leading out? Are you checking? What are you thinking?
In general, I think my plan would be just a check call.
Why is that?
Because we have plenty of equity with our double gutter outs, and so we can just check call to realize our equity versus most bet sizes, and the other options are like, so if we check and villain bets, our options are to call, fold, or raise. I don't think folding makes any sense because we have enough equity to call and we're deep. I also don't think raising makes sense because villain, again, has a strong range from opening under the gun. So villain probably has all sets in his range, a lot of strong king X like ace, king, king, queen. So I don't really know that raising accomplishes a lot if we check and villain bets. And then the other option is to lead here. But I don't really, I don't really see like a major problem with leading here, but I just don't really, that's not really a part of my game, especially this early on. Pretty much checking range in this scenario, BB versus under the gun.
Okay.
On the flop.
I end up leading out here, and I think that was a mistake. I would like leading a little bit more if there was a heart out there. So we got Jack 10 of hearts, and the board is 7 of clubs, 9 of spades, king of clubs. Mm-hmm. So if we had something like, if any one of those I think was a heart, I think leading would be a little bit better. But you're right. We're leading out into an under the gun opener whose range is a lot stronger than ours. Maybe we could justify leading out a little bit more if it was like a button open or a cutoff open. But yeah, I think you're right. I think this is a check call. By checking, you get him to fire with probably his full range. Yeah, I like it. I end up leading into 180. I bet 77. I think that's too small. I think if you're going to lead, then we need to do it. Probably not twice that, but almost, maybe something like 120 to 150.
Yeah.
Okay. I end up leading, and under the gun, he calls. So when he calls here, I think he's calling with flush draws, a king, obviously, just about all his pairs. I think for such small sizing, he's pretty much calling everything, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you could almost just make it as simple as just saying he's calling with his entire preflop range.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I lead, he calls. The pot is now 334. We've each got about 9,800 behind. Super deep. And the turn is the 7 of hearts. So we have Jack 10 of hearts, and the flop was 7 of clubs, 9 of spades, king of clubs, and the turn is the 7 of hearts. When I donk lead, I usually like to be able to bet the turn and then bet the river. Mm-hmm. But I don't think I want to do that here when the board pairs.
I kind of think that that's a really good card for you to take the triple barrel line on.
Oh.
Because you have a lot more 7x in your range, I think, than villain does. Okay. Under the gun opening range doesn't have that much 7x in it, but when you defend big blind and then donk, I think that's a line where like you probably have way more 7x in your range than villain does, and also the thing is that villain probably perceives you to have more 7x in your range than he does. It's hard for him to just like float a 7 on the flop. Like I can't really think of many 7s he can have unless he has pocket 7s. He could have like ace 7 suited, but there's just not that many 7s he can have. But you're flatting big blind versus it was a min raise, right? Pre-flop.
Yeah.
So you have like a shit ton of 7s in your range. And you can rep a lot more here. So I kind of like, so what's the pot now? It's going to be 320, 330 ish.
334.
334. Okay. And it was the 7 of hearts. Yeah. So I think it's, I would consider if you're going to donk flop, I would consider double barreling turn and river here and like doing it pretty big, like going like 220 on the turn. And then if he calls, going like 600 on the river or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. I think you're right. I didn't think about that at the moment. This is probably why I brought this hand up, because I butchered it right from the start. But I end up checking, and villain bets 251.
Okay.
What are you thinking here? Are we calling, or are we letting it go, or?
I would just fold. What are you going to do if you call? What are you going to do on the river, like on various rivers? I feel like there's not much of a way for you to win this hand if you just call here. I mean, I almost like check. Yeah, I definitely think I like check raising better than just check calling here. But I wouldn't do either. I think I would just fold.
Okay. Yeah, boy, I F this hand up. My line, I remember in the moment I was thinking, okay, if I get an 8 or a queen, I can, I make my straight, and I can maybe get value from a king here. If I get a club, I think my line here looks kind of like a flush draw. And tell me what you think of that. We called in we just flat his min raise pre-flop. We bet small on the flop. We check call the turn. If there's a club on the river, we fire. Does that sound like a flush draw, or am I way off?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think that's reasonable. I just don't know that we have enough fold equity. Like, even if the club does come and you fire this early in the tournament with this deep of stacks, is Villain going to fold a king when it's like a small percentage of his stack and he still has plenty of chips? It's not as likely, I don't think. Like, if this was a deep spot in a tournament where there's maybe ICM pressure, or you're threatening Villain's stack a little bit more, then I think that is probably a little bit more relevant. But in general, I mean, what was the buy-in for this?
I believe this was 33.
Okay, so like if we try to think about like pool tendencies in these small to mid buy-in tournaments, I think you're going to get heroed, and like just not, people aren't going to really be like overfolding too much this early in a tournament with top pair. And the other thing is, all of his top pairs are like almost certainly going to be strong top pairs, like ace king, king queen type of stuff. Like, he's not really going to show up here with like king 4 offsuit very often or anything like that.
Yeah, the bottom of his kings is probably king jack, huh?
Yeah, so I think it's difficult to really. I don't think we can assume that villains are just going to be like, oh, he must have a flush, and then fold their king X.
Okay.
Too often. Sometimes it'll happen, but I don't think it's going to happen enough to make that plan that great of a plan.
Okay.
I guess, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. When he's only got to call 4% of his stack on the river, that's really nothing. Okay. Well, haven't followed good advice yet, and so I call. The pot is now 836,
Okay.
and the river is the 4 clubs. So the flop was, we've got Jack 10 of hearts. The flop was 7 of clubs, 9 of spades, King of clubs, giving us a double gutter. Turn was 7 of hearts, pairing the board, and the river is the 4 clubs, putting 3 clubs out there.
Okay, so as played, I think you got to follow through with your plan. If you're going to take this line, yeah, you should bomb here. But I just wouldn't. I don't think that the line up to here was maybe the best, but
that's a delicate way of putting it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's a complex game. This could be like some GTO play that I have no idea about. But my personal opinion is that you're just not going to have enough fold equity to be like if Villain was going to fold every single river every time the river is a club, then your thought process in this line would be okay, I think. But I don't think it's true.
Yeah.
I think Villain's not going to fold that often.
He's probably only folding a small percentage of his hands, something like maybe ace-9 suited that's not clubs, maybe pocket 8s, pocket 10s, pocket jacks, possibly pocket queens. Maybe that's about it.
I might just. I mean, I said I would fire here and go. But I don't know if that's totally true. Like, I might even. I've been trying to think about lately, like not throwing away money on later streets just to follow along with a line. Like if you realize, it's possible to realize in the middle of the hand, like, wait a minute, this might not be an intelligent line, and then decide to give up on your plan, which I think is reasonable to do here as well.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, I mean, if you're gonna make the play on the turn with the intention of firing Club Rivers, then follow through and fire here. But I don't know if that's going to be a profitable plan coming from the turn.
Yeah, long run, this probably isn't the right line. I think he's got a lot of. Let's from his perspective, I'm in bet. Then he bets turn. He calls flop, bets turn. I feel like he's got a lot of King X, medium pairs, or just nothing. I don't know, like Ace Queen or something. We can't even beat that.
I mean, he could have flushes too sometimes. He could have like something like Ace Queen of Clubs, or something like that. Actually, there's not very many. Maybe like Ace Queen of Clubs, Ace Jack of Clubs. So there's not a whole lot of combos, but
yeah,
he could have like King X. King X, I think, is a big part of his range. I don't think he's just going to have. I don't think in general villains are just going to show up with like air in this spot very often.
Okay.
So yeah, I think King X is a pretty big part of his range. But.
Yeah, I think so too. Okay, well, I stick with my line. Into 836, I bet 888 and fill in tank folds. So I think I got fortunate here in that he probably had something like 8s, 10s, jacks, maybe queens. But I think that's a small part of his range, and King X is a much larger part of his range.
Well, yeah, I will say that if you're gonna call the turn, you be firing here, and you should follow through with your line. And I also overbet, or you bet basically pot.
I overbet.
I think it would be. Yeah, I think if you bet like 500 or 600 here, it would be a lot worse because it's so much easier for villain to find a call there. So yeah, I like the sizing. If you're gonna call the turn with this plan, I think you need to bet that sizing on the river, which I think is good. I don't really lead ever in this situation. This deep stacked early in a tournament, I'm checking my whole range. So the donk is something I don't do, and I guess I don't really understand the value in it. And part of the reason why I don't like to do that is because I kind of just feel like I think there's value in simplifying your strategy. And if you dunk here, you have to worry about a lot more ranges to how you're going to play a lot more ranges on later streets and stuff, like as we see in this example. But if you're just going to check your range here, it's a lot. I feel like it's a lot easier to have an overall strategy and kind of put your ranges into buckets where you're going to have a check fold range, you're going to have a check call range, you're going to have a check raise range. But then once you start donking, then you get to the turn with the range you donk the flop with and the range you check the flop with. And once you donk, you have to decide if you're donking and then calling a raise, or donking and then fold. Like it just makes the later streets more complicated, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right. I like your check call on the flop. I think that makes a lot more sense, especially this deep. And, right on. Cool. Well, thank you, Doug. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun chatting.
Yeah. If you guys want to get a hold of Doug, you can do so at douglyford.com. Let's see, or you can just click on the link in the show notes. Rate and review us on iTunes, and I'll read it on the air. Check out your 7-minute tilt buster. Click on the link in the show notes for that. Thank you for tuning in. Here is your weekly motivational speech.
We are running out of time. What are you going to do with the time you have left? I say that if you don't reposition yourself, you could miss the best time in your life. this season of life. Because we have got to change the way we think. We have got to change the way we function. We have got to change the way we deal with issues. And the reason that you have to begin to reposition the way you think and the way you function and the way you feel is that we many times are stuck between the lines of limited thinking and limited people and limited ideas and limited philosophies, and there's something creative down inside of you saying, let there be. You need to walk into a situation where you've been locked up and tied up and tangled up and say, let there be light, let there be healing, let there be books, let there be change in this city. You have tried 4 or 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different things. Each you worked on 90 days or so and then said it doesn't work. How can you be a leader with a 90-day test? Of course it didn't work. You didn't stick to it long enough. You didn't fight hard enough. You didn't do what it took to win, and rather than to correct it and get it right, you walked away from it and tried something else. And for the last 10, 15 years of your life, you've been on the run from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, trying to make all this stuff work. Stop it. Stand still. You have to have the courage to live with the pressure and the criticism. New levels bring new devils. You have to be tough. You have to be tough to be able to stand it.